Wait. Okay. All right. Hello. I started a new job 2 months ago, moving from software to hardware and robotics, and I started thinking about how you can continuously deploy software to hardware, and if you should. You might have seen this YouTube video. This was Marquez Brownlee doing a review on the Fisker Ocean. Fisker asked him to hold off and wait. They even offered to send out a field technician to deploy the latest update from a USB drive. But he wanted to review what was already out there, and the review turned out to be very bad. So Fisker eventually released V2 over the air through 3 separate updates, but car manufacturers are starting to learn, like other industries, that hardware is hard. Continuous pipelines are designed to increase efficiency and reduce human errors, and at every step, you get to choose how and what you automate. So you start off by automating builds and CI tests, layer on UI and performance tests to make sure your code is release ready, and even with deployment, it's possible, maybe not recommended, but it's possible to automate the release to production once your tests pass. But in the physical world, sometimes you can't push updates to devices when they're in use. So this boat here has navigation software, communication, weather finding, fish finding. These are low power, low bandwidth devices that have unreliable connectivity. So like in cars, you have consumer electronics and wearables. You have industrial IoT on the factory floor, smart home, smart buildings, smart cities. Last year, Rivian pushed, I'm not a car person, but they pushed an OTA update that locked up their infotainment system. When it came time to deploy the build, they selected the wrong security certificate from the dropdown. So they originally thought that a physical repair would be needed, towing in cars, sending out field technicians, but they found a creative way to send an OTA update to a part-loaded system. They had been testing this rigorously for months on actual consumer vehicles, but when it came time to send out the build, they sent out the wrong one, and they didn't have a process in place to communicate to their users. The head of software actually posted on Reddit 10 hours before their public relations department learned about it. So don't ignore your network and device constraints. Make your updates as small as possible, as optimal as possible for these low power, low bandwidth devices, and support resumable downloads instead of having to restart from scratch. Other best practices, over the air. This is gonna allow you to scale a lot more low cost than deploying through a USB drive. And tests are only as good as you write them, and the automation is best in stable and known environments. And don't go all at once. You can hedge your bets a lot with stage rollouts and rollbacks, feature toggles, blue-green deployments, and dual boot systems for firmware updates. So if you're made of money, you have a lot of cash, you might have bought an iPhone recently and noticed that they're packaging those iPhones face down. They're taking the MagSafe ring to power on the device and deploy those updates while the iPhone is still in its box. Apple is a really premium brand, but being in an Apple store is kind of like being in a Costco parking lot. So Apple decided, through no one asking about it, to preemptively update the software to improve the overall user experience. So there's a lot of reasons to streamline pipelines, but also reasons we don't want to automate all the things. I'll let you read this here. To boil it down, it's a trade-off between automation and control. So automate what makes sense. We saw how streamlining deployments can add value, but with too much automation, you're like this guy here. You're out of the boat, but you're still going down the pipeline. One last juicy example, this is about TD Ameritrade. A few weeks ago, they migrated the robo-traders over from the TD Ameritrade API over to the Schwab API. And when the markets opened on Monday, you might have sent your very first API call and gotten back 429 too many requests on the very first call. So if you're an engineer working at Schwab, you might not know that your API traffic is being routed through a CDN, and if you don't properly configure your headers, then every API call is going to be passing through with the same IP. So just like automation is only helpful when you know the context and the context doesn't change, hardware is hard, but hardware is like software, and change is inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.